All right, let's get right into it. Have you ever been in one of those conversations? You know the ones. They feel totally one-sided. You're either playing the role of an interviewer, asking all the questions, or even worse, you're just a silent audience member. Well, today we're going to decode a really fascinating communication puzzle. It's a story that actually started with a reality TV show, but trust me, it reveals something incredibly deep about how we all try to connect, or, sometimes fail to. So this whole thing blew up because of this one simple observation from a Dutch dating show. Viewers started noticing this bizarre pattern. The men on the show would talk and talk and talk about themselves, but they almost never asked the women any questions. It sparked this huge conversation across the country, and honestly, it's the perfect way for us to dive into this topic. And you see, this little observation from a TV show, it really points to a much bigger, more universal question, doesn't it? Why is it that in some conversations, one person feels totally free to just broadcast their thoughts, while the other person is sort of sitting there, patiently waiting for an invitation, a question, before they feel like they can speak? It's a dynamic I'm sure we've all felt, and today, we're going to get to the bottom of it. So, our first stop in this investigation, our first big clue, comes from a pretty heavy hitter, the philosopher Michel Foucault. And his take is that this isn't just about someone having bad manners. No, it's about something much deeper, ingrained structures of power that kind of dictate who gets to speak and when. Foucault's whole idea really boils down to this concept he called the right to speak. The theory is that certain groups in society are basically trained, conditioned from a young age, to believe that their voice is inherently important, that it just deserves to be heard. So they don't feel the need to wait for an opening in the conversation. They feel totally entitled to just create one. And what happens is, this dynamic creates these two very distinct, unspoken roles. First, you've got the sender. This is the person who feels that right to speak and just starts transmitting information. And then you have the receiver, who's been socially conditioned to wait for a signal, for that invitation, usually in the form of a question, before they feel like it's their turn to contribute. Now, that is a really compelling theory, for sure. But is it the whole story? I mean, is every person who doesn't ask questions just exercising some kind of unconscious privilege? Or maybe could there be something else going on entirely? And that question right there leads us to our second major clue. And that brings us to a completely different angle. This one comes from the world of sociolinguistics, specifically from a researcher named Deborah Tannen. And she suggests that maybe we're not always dealing with a power imbalance. Maybe we're just dealing with two fundamentally different communication operating systems. The big idea here is that this whole issue isn't always about one person trying to dominate the other. Sometimes it's just that people are using language to achieve completely different goals. It's kind of like a Mac trying to run software that was only designed for a PC. They're both fantastic computers, right? But they're just not speaking the same native language. So Tannen breaks down these two operating systems into what she calls report talk and rapport talk. Okay, so for report talk, the main goal is to transmit information and maybe establish a little status. You add value by telling things, by sharing facts. But with rapport talk, the goal is totally different. It's all about building connection and intimacy. And how do you do that? Well, you do it by asking questions to find common ground. Two different systems, two different goals. Okay. So now we've got these two really powerful theories explaining the why behind all this. But, understanding the problem is one thing. Actually changing the dynamic? That's a whole other ballgame. So how do we fix it? Well, the answer isn't waiting around for the other person to change. The solution is for you to become the architect of the conversation. And this, right here, this is the crucial mindset shift. Real empowerment means you stop waiting for the other person to magically change their communication style. Instead, you take ownership. You decide to actively redesign the interaction to create the balanced two-way conversation that you're actually looking for. And here's the protocol to do it. It's a simple three-step plan. Step 1. Just stop waiting. You do not need an engraved invitation to speak. Step 2, you have to break the pattern. When someone is just monologuing, you need to find a way to intervene. And step 3, filter their intent. You have to remind yourself that their style might just be their operating system, not a personal attack on you. All right, so that's the strategy. You've got the mindset, but now let's get practical. Let's open up the Architect's Toolkit because I'm going to give you 3 specific phrases, 3 tools you can use to reshape a one-sided conversation right in the moment. Your first tool is what we call the playful mirror.
Now, this one is awesome because it's so gentle and non-confrontational. You start by framing it positively, I've been fascinated listening, and then you playfully hand them the responsibility of asking a question. And what's amazing is, it so often makes them realize, oh, wow, I haven't asked a single thing yet.
Okay, tool number 2, the bridge and claim. This is for when you're done waiting around. You don't have to be rude or interrupt them, but you build a quick bridge from whatever they're talking about to your own topic, and then you just confidently walk across it to claim your speaking time. You're basically creating your own invitation to the party. And then, for those really persistent cases, you've got the meta intervention. This is where you kind of zoom out and you comment on the structure of the conversation itself. It feels direct, but notice how it's phrased collaboratively. Let's switch roles. It turns it into an invitation to build a better dialogue together, not an accusation. So, where can we put this new toolkit to the test? Let's apply it to a really high-stakes scenario where this dynamic pops up all the time: a first date. How does a conversation architect handle a date who only talks about themselves? Let's find out. Here's the blueprint. It's a game changer. First, you prepare your mindset. You're not going in there as a candidate hoping to be approved of. You're going in as an architect, there to co-design an experience. Second, you observe for the first 15 minutes or so. Is this person just nervous, or is this their default operating system? And third, if the pattern holds, you intervene. You deploy one of your tools, the mirror, the bridge, whatever fits, and you actively steer the conversation back toward a real connection. But when you really think about it, this goes so far beyond just dating or casual chats. This is about your agency in every single interaction you have. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. In your life, in your conversations, are you passively waiting for an invitation to contribute? Or are you actively architecting the world where your voice, your ideas, and your presence are self-evident?